Hey there, Kodandi here. My name is Manithya Kodandyananda, and I am an initiated Adinavasi of the Nityananda order, which means that I stay with my guru at his Adinam here in India. An Adinam is like an ashram, but it's so much more. And today I'm out. They're doing a lot of construction, so I'm trying to find a place that doesn't have construction trucks, but let's see what we can do. I'm on the road out to the Sacred Arts University and having a nice walk. I wanted to talk to you about, trigger warning. I'm going to talk about dissociation and self-harm and how that led me through this whole pharmaceutical process, which failed ultimately, and how it led me to join the Adinam here. So this was probably maybe, what is it? I think it was 2015 this happened, where I was having problems with dissociation. Dissociation is a common symptom of PTSD, and what happens is that you don't feel safe in your own body, in your own world, and so you experience this separation. So there's depersonalization, where you feel like you don't identify with yourself as a person, and there's derealization, where you don't identify with reality. I've experienced these things many times, let me tell you, because for such a long time I did not feel safe in myself, in my body, and I did not feel safe in my reality. But on one particular night, so I ended up at this yoga class, and I don't know what happened, but I started dissociating in the middle of the yoga class. And so I'm in the yoga class, and I'm watching myself from, above. I'm watching myself do this yoga class. But, as much as I'm watching myself from above, I'm also very aware of what my body is doing. So I'm kind of in both places at once. And go through the class, I just feel like shit, of course, because I'm dissociating and I'm not in my body. And I drive home, and I get home, and I really just do not identify with myself. Like I'm still not in my body. I don't recognize myself. I look in the mirror, and I do not recognize my face as my own. And so I'm standing in the bathroom mirror, and for several years, well, I don't know several, but for a year or two, the dissociation was common enough that I just did not recognize myself in the mirror. But this time it was so severe and so upsetting that what I did was I took a razor blade and I started cutting my face, like just little lines along my chin with the razor blade, because I was trying to feel myself again. And I stood in front of the mirror watching myself do this, trying to connect what I was seeing with what I was feeling on my face, with what I was feeling my hand doing, and trying to feel in my body again. Just trying so hard to reconnect. And I mean, I don't think I have any scars from it, but I stood there just cutting my face with a razor blade in order to feel like myself again, in order to be able to recognize my face and recognize who I am and get back into my body, because I was so disconnected, that I felt so unsafe in my own body, that I had dissociated. And then, it's really upsetting to be in a dissociative state where you don't recognize who you are and you literally just cannot see yourself, and just trying so hard to get out of it. And honestly, that night is kind of a blur. it was late, it was dark, it was probably about November-ish, and, I just went to bed after that. I don't remember. But yeah, that is one of the two most severe dissociative states that I've been in. Another one that I was in, it was, I had been at school, and I thought I was feeling better because I was just sort of constantly dissociating, and I'm like, I woke up and I'm like, I feel better today. I'm going to be better. I'm going to not dissociate today. And I go to school and that just like falls out the window. I have one class. I go to the class. I probably like say something stupid because like I don't know where I am. I'm not here. Like, what's going on? Where's reality? Who am I? Like, dissociation. But I get out of class and I start to go back to my car. And logically in my brain, my logic brain knows which direction to walk in order to find my car. But, the rest of my being is just like, how did I get here? Did I even drive this morning? Where did I park? How did I get here? And just not really clearly remembering. And it took a while. I was walking in the direction that seemed logical. And I was trying to remember any details, and I remembered, oh yes, I drove in and I parked by a tree. I parked really close to this tree or this shrubbery. So I walked and I was, looking at the shrubbery, like which cars are parked by trees and shrubbery until I found my car. And let me tell you, driving while you're dissociating is like terrifying. It's really terrifying. Like, I put my motorcycle in storage because I just did not want to take a chance on the motorcycle. I probably shouldn't have been driving either, but riding public transportation was so much worse. And so, I drive home and it's, commute traffic, Oakland, California. It gets busy on the 880 going south, and there's traffic, and I get home. My roommate's not home. So I text one of my friends. No answer. I start to wonder if maybe I'm dead, right? And I'm like, no, don't go there, don't go there. And then it's like, no, wait a minute. There was a lot of traffic. What if I died in a car accident on the way home and I didn't realize it? And that's why no one's responding to my text, and my roommate's not home. So I try texting another friend. No response. I try calling the first friend that I texted. No response. Now I'm really freaking out because no one is responding to my calls and my texts. And I get so upset because I really honestly do not know if I am dead or alive. That I was so out of this reality that I just didn't know if I was dead or alive. And I'm freaking out. And I'm like, okay, I gotta do something. So I text the mental health crisis text line. In the U.S., it's 741-741. They are good people. Highly recommend them. And I'm texting with them. And, through my text with them, it seems that I am indeed alive. And so I get myself some food to help ground myself. And slowly I come back to the reality that I am not dead. I am definitely alive. So yeah, that is, those are the states that I was in. And it was actually after, probably about a month after the razor blade incident, that I decided I had to go get some help. That this was not grief. This was not grief for my boyfriend that died. This was something way more than that. And so I saw a therapist first because that's kind of the easy way in. Saw the therapist, started working with him. He was not helpful at all. They referred me to different classes and workshops, referred me to a psychiatrist, referred me to another therapist that did a more specialized form of therapy called EMDR. And EMDR was actually effective, but it's weird. It's a really weird thing. They don't know how or why it works, but essentially what you do with EMDR is you relive the traumatic situation, and you have these headphones on, and there's these alternating beeps, like beep, beep on each side, going back and forth. I also had her once do it where I was supposed to like follow her finger with my eyes back and forth. That's something about this sort of alternating side thing makes the recollection and the reliving of the memory, it makes it easier, and it allows you to let go of it. And so I had a number of EMDR sessions with her, and it was actually really effective. She was a very good therapist. It got me to stop dissociating as much as I had been. It would still happen every now and then. It still kind of happens every now and then. Like, I have to be honest, it still kind of happens. But it's not like what it used to be, where I don't know if I'm dead or alive and I stand in the bathroom cutting my face, But they also sent me to a psychiatrist who was prescribing, of course. And at that point, I would try anything. I mean, you could tell me anything, and I would try it, and I would do it because I was so desperate for anything that would get me out of this PTSD trauma state. And so he started me on prescriptions, and I don't even remember what order they were in, but it was like Zoloft, Paxil, Effexor. No, I didn't take. I'd taken Effexor previously, and Effexor made me so sick. I think I declined Effexor, but there was like Wellbutrin, Celexa. How many is that? Zoloft, Paxil, Wellbutrin, Celexa. I think there were a total of 6 prescriptions. So I think there were 2 more from that class that I took. But every single prescription had absolutely intolerable side effects. Absolutely intolerable. I could not stand to take them long enough to feel any positive effects at all. Zoloft in particular was so dangerous. It made me such a zombie. And I'm a sculptor. I was in school at the time. I worked in the sculpture studios where, as a shop monitor, where if someone comes in and wants to use the table saw, I'm the one that helps them. If someone comes in and is afraid to use the table saw, I'm the one that's got to cut their wood. If someone comes in and wants to learn how to weld, I'm the one teaching them to weld, I set up the, band saws, and, if someone wants to do blacksmithing, I have to set up the, the forge for them. And I mean, working with significant heavy machinery, and I'm on Zoloft, and I just can't. I can't. It was just, I was a zombie. I was so dull, and it was bad. It was really, really bad. And I talked to other people who were on Zoloft that it worked for. I don't know what their situation was. I don't know what was going on, but I just cannot imagine living like that, being this, dull zombie and not being able to do something simple like use a table saw because I was afraid I would hurt myself. And so I went through this series of prescriptions. Like, I don't think I took any of them for more than 2 weeks because they all made me massively ill. Like the Wellbutrin when I was depressed previously had been actually very helpful. But when I took it this time around, it made me really uncomfortably, agitated and restless. And the other ones made me just, have constant diarrhea and upset stomach. I mean, it was just useless. These things were absolutely useless. And, looking back on it, I think, there's a lot I could say about pharmacology and, psychiatry and these things. But essentially, in a nutshell, science doesn't really have a lot of good information about what happens in the brain with the brain chemistry. There's a lot that can be inferred from observation. There is, some information that you can get through various types of, scans. But if you go in and say I'm depressed, there's no like test the doctor can give to be like, oh, your serotonin level is X and it needs to be between Y and Z. Let's give you this prescription, like you would for diabetes. That there's nothing like that for brain chemistry. And, a lot of that has to do with sort of just like, we don't have the technology to be able to, enter the brain in that way without killing someone. Like we don't really have the technology to be able to study the pineal gland without killing someone. which is, of course, useless and unethical. So, when you're dealing with these prescriptions, they're gambling, basically. Like, they know that, various clinical results happen, but, it's just all sorts of weird, random chemicals that they throw in and hope do something. It's a little more sophisticated than that, but essentially it's just that. And Zoloft in particular is, like, mostly fluoride, which is why it makes you so dull and zombie-like. And, I just can't imagine what your mental health must be like if that's what you need and what works for you. But for me, what I found was that, it wasn't an issue of brain chemistry. It wasn't an issue of psychiatry. It wasn't an issue of psychology. That those things are just, those fields are so limited. First of all, part of it, I believe, was related to thyroid. And I believe that, the stress from the PTSD and the trauma was starting to affect my endocrine system. And a lot of people with trauma end up with, autoimmune disease, endocrine disorders, things like that, because, the body does some weird thing, and trauma is held in the body so strongly and can have really, really significant effects on our health. If you want to read about the research on this, look for, ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. They were able to quantify what sort of adverse childhood experiences would cause what sort of health problems and at what, percentage of risk. So you could, see, if your ACEs score is, this, you're this much more percentage at risk for heart disease, or you're that much more percentage risk for suicide. And, a lot of these things on the ACEs test are common things like divorce that can actually be so traumatic that it can affect your health in this way. But anyway, back to my thing. So I believe what happened was that the trauma, the PTSD, started affecting my endocrine system. I was having weird hormonal things, including what appeared to be low thyroid. I started taking herbs to boost the thyroid, which improved my mental health a lot, actually. That hormones and hormone imbalances and, low hormones can have an incredible effect on our mood and our mental health that I think is really underestimated. And so many people with depression and anxiety could benefit from thyroid herbs or thyroid supplements. So I started taking the thyroid herbs, which helped a lot. But, really it was a matter of I had to just process the trauma and process everything that happened. I'm not even going to go into all the things that happened because, one of them involves a court case which has not been resolved yet, and I don't legally think it's a good idea for me to talk about. But, it was just like a lifetime of trauma and abuse and, stuff that I had worked hard to resolve, but, then something new would happen and it would get triggered all over again. I found my guru Swamiji in 2012, and in 2013 I did Inner Awakening program. At that time you could do it on a two-way video conferencing, and it was amazing, and I healed so much of the trauma through this completion technique. And then, all sorts of new traumas happen, because just because you achieve some blissful state doesn't mean that the rest of the world finds world peace. You find inner peace, the rest of the world is still the rest of the world. People still die, violence happens, people fire guns and the bullets hit you in the back and things like that, and I was blissful enough that I had come a long way in healing, but I was not blissful enough that I was prepared to deal with all of the new traumas that happened. And so, I am remembering and reliving the traumas as you would do in the completion technique just caused me to dissociate more. And we have some more machinery coming along, so I apologize for the noise. Um, so I was unable to do completion because remembering and reliving the trauma just triggered me to dissociate even further. Apologies for the noise. It's really exciting, all of the construction that's happening here, I have to say that. So anyway, like I was saying, remembering and reliving the experiences like how it's done in the completion technique, doing it on my own, sitting at home, would just trigger me to dissociate. And so I wasn't able to use the completion technique, something that I felt had been a lifesaver before. Oh, look at this cool rock. I'll stand here by the cool rock. And so, the EMDR helped because the EMDR is really similar. Oddly enough, it's really similar to another technique that my guru uses where you're sitting in this, sacred geometry and this, various sounds and mantras are being played. And it has the same sort of effect of, kind of going back and forth in your brain. And so I don't know what the relationship is between those two, but I think there is some relationship between those two. I think EMDR in psychology has finally caught on to something that works from the Vedic tradition. I don't know. But yeah, so the EMDR got me to stop dissociating so much, but I was still a wreck. I was still an absolute train wreck inside, and I wanted to come to inner awakening. And for various reasons, it wasn't working out. Like, there were just so many issues. I just wanted to come back to inner awakening, to work with my guru in person, because when you get one-on-one initiation from him directly, what he does an energy darshan, where he will put his thumb on your forehead, on your third eye, or he might touch the top of your head, or something like that, transfer some energy to you, give you some sort of energetic initiation, and you have some inner shift of, whatever sort of initiation he gave you. And so I knew that his techniques worked because they had worked for me before. I knew that completion was the key to get through this trauma, but the trauma was so severe I was not able to complete it on my own at home. I had to come here to be in a safe environment and to work with him directly in order to get the help that I needed and the support that I needed, and to feel safe enough in myself and in reality that I could face these things without, flying off into dissociation land again. So, to make a long story short, I end up joining as an Adinavasi. So I have now made a lifetime commitment because, just things weren't working out, and I was just more and more and more miserable. And so I realized, it is absolutely 100% worth it for me to make this commitment to be an Adinavasi if it means that I'm healed and I'm functional, because otherwise, I was barely functional enough to walk dogs, that's my Matrix World job, walking dogs. And it was a struggle, a real struggle for me to go and play with someone's dog and take it on a walk, dog walking is definitely a challenging job. You have to know how to handle dogs. I know how to handle dogs, and it was still just going and playing with people's dogs was difficult, but it was the only thing I could do. And it's I'm going to spend the rest of my life going between lying in bed and walking dogs, and that is it. That is not my life. That is not what I want. And there was just nothing I could do. Psychiatry had failed me. They kept sending me to these various classes on, grounding skills and self-soothing and depression management, and I went to depression support group, and that was just miserable, okay? If you want to become depressed, check out some of these depression support groups, because people are just, miserable in these things. It was just not good. Not what I needed. And, none of it was working for me. Absolutely nothing, because they weren't really getting at the issue. They were trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, right? You gotta pull the bullet out. Now, when I got shot, the bullet did not puncture me, by the way. It skidded across my back. It left a huge abrasion. If you watch my video about how I got shot and Swamiji Nityananda healed me, I put a picture of my back in it if you're curious about what happened. But yeah, you know, that's what psychology and psychiatry is doing. It's trying to get you to just like calm down and be a zombie and kind of pacify you without necessarily getting you forward and getting you into a better place. I mean, it gets you to like be at a plateau, which was not like, that's not living for me. Like, maybe other people are okay with that, but I want to live big, you know? I've got a lot of life in me. Life is short, and I want to live it all and not spend my days in bed, leaving the house only long enough to walk dogs. So, yeah. That is my story. That is the beginning of it. Thank you for those of you that are watching still. If you want any information about my guru, how you can come here, how you can get healed, various other programs that are happening, how you can support me, how you can find me on social media, check the description. It's got everything. Okay.